Good evening. I believe I'm getting you from Japan. Am I getting you from Japan?
Yep, live from Tokyo, and it's
Live from
evening here.
Tokyo. And that is a great Who shirt that you're wearing right now. Big fan, Quadrophenia?
You you recognize it?
Of course, of course.
Yeah, it's the old Spitfire, the Rondell. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm a huge Who fan. Actually, I've interviewed Pete Townsend a number of times, and he endorsed my book. So if you pick up Japan America, you'll see his blurb on the cover.
Yeah. Didn't the Who only tour Japan for the first time in '08? It took like 40 years.
Exactly right. And they did play a couple of festival shows here in '04. But they came back and did a tour in '08, and they were great shows. They were really in good form.
The Who never goes wrong, well, except the early '80s. But that's not why we're talking here. Why we're talking here is that you've got this great documentary series that the folks at Sheba helped make happen, but your creativity shows from every morsel, from every scene that I've shown. And the Tokyo Cat related part of it, the Japan Cat, how do you like the episode to be called?
I think it's called Japan Cats.
Okay,
And
Japan
then
Cat.
Tama is sometimes added to the title. Tama is the station master cat.
Yes, very compelling stuff right there. And a 14-minute episode, how much filming is actually needed to make a great 14-minute concise episode like that?
Well, I didn't do the shooting, but I know they shot tons of stuff and a lot of interviews. A lot of what I said, which I thought was very profound, got cut. But I think what they ended up with is quite compelling. It's a great, one of the things that I appreciate about what the filmmakers did is that they didn't take the kind of weird Japan angle, which is
Yes.
it's kind of lazy and easy to take. Japan,
Sure.
cat cafes are weird, or Japanese Hello Kitty is weird or something. They didn't exoticize it. They made it feel quite soulful, which I thought was very respectable.
Yeah, it reminded me instantly of the Hachiko saga, story, tale.
Yeah.
I never knew that kind of thing existed for the cat world. Did you always know about that cat?
Yeah, actually, I knew about the cat when she was made station master, and then I was interviewed by National Public Radio in the U.S. When she died in 2015, because as they point out in this film, there were 3,000 people who went to the funeral service for Tama, and at the time, it seemed like quite a rich story of rural revival. The rural areas of Japan, just like in the US, a lot of farming communities and so on have really suffered a hollowing out. And this train station was in danger of closing.
Mm-hmm.
So this cat, Tama, actually helped the station survive and helped the local community keep its railway system intact. So it was an economic story as well.
Yeah, it definitely hits on a few levels. Not everybody in the world is a cat person per se, but when you add in the economics, the fact that it's a story that hasn't been told, there's always weight in that. The fact that it's Japan, it kind of makes it a universal story in how unique it is. Now, you personally, have you always been a cat person?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I quite like dogs as well. But I suppose personally, I came to Japan for the first time when I was in kindergarten. My mother's Japanese, so I lived with my grandparents up north, and their little town was filled with stray cats. They were all over the place, ducking under the eaves and spilling out into the alleyways. And so I was kind of surrounded by cats as a kid. And then the only pet that I ever had was a stray cat that, just like Tama, sort of came into our household and hung around. And then this is when my parents, my Japanese mother and my American father, were living in northern New England. So it was mountainous and nature and nothing else. So having a cat was very important to me. It was really my closest companion when I was about 10 or 12 years old.
I didn't know when I asked that question if 12 cats were suddenly going to appear or not, or if you're the kind of person that actually, I find this a lot. Sometimes you find writers do the exact opposite of what they write about. So, for example, to use a music analogy, someone once told me a story about Lemmy from Motorhead. Did you ever interview Lemmy?
I never have. No. That would be cool.
Oh man, who didn't love Lemmy? They were talking to Lemmy off script, just hanging out, and he was talking about how much he liked Mariah Carey. And you go, what? The Motorhead metal guy loves Mariah Carey. Well, sometimes I find that a lot of writers actually don't subscribe to or aren't around the stuff that they write about. That's why I wanted to ask that kind of thing. I didn't know if there was going to be 20 cats or 0 cats in your life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like I said, the only pet I ever had was a cat, was a stray. And I was absolutely devastated when he died. And in fact, that was probably it was one of the most traumatic events in my life, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
So I quite identified with the story of Tama. And when, 3,000 people showed up for Tama's funeral service, and it was so elegant and so beautifully executed. Yeah, I felt a real kinship. And I think, as I say in the film, there is an identification on some level with many Japanese, not all obviously, but many Japanese with cats and feline behavior. I think, Japanese love dogs as well, so it's not one-sided, but I do think the cat's character, the relative reserve of a cat and silence and cleanliness, which is a prized aspect of Japanese culture and spirituality. I think there are elements of cat behavior that many Japanese kind of identify with. In fact, one of the most famous novels in Japanese modern history is called I Am a Cat by Natsumi Soseki. So right there, and most Japanese read that in school. So it's sort of like the way in America you might read Catcher in the Rye or Great Gatsby or something. You're going to read I Am a Cat. So,
I Am a Cat. Wow.
It says it all, doesn't it?
As somebody who's doing interviews, 5-6 days a week during COVID-19, some of the people I'm talking to who have a film or a television kind of project, you go, so when did you make this film? And they go, 2017. And it was, the film business, generally things don't come out overnight. And on top of that, COVID delayed things and then pushed up other things. In the case of this docuseries, when did you actually film?
Well, for the cat, the Japan episode, that's a good question. Now that you mentioned it was a couple of years ago. I mean, you if you did the same shoot today, then all of the people in the film would be wearing masks.
Yeah,
and there would be far fewer people gathered around the train station or in the carriages. So, yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell if you look at it that it was shot pre-COVID. I think the only one wearing a mask is the actual train conductor in the film. But there again, I mean, mask wearing is much more common in Asia in general, even pre-pandemic. So it's not so unusual to see someone wearing a mask. But right now, if I step out of my office in Tokyo, everyone's wearing a mask,
Well, going back a little bit in pop culture, when Michael Jackson, who left us close to a decade ago, when he was wearing a mask, Americans were kind of going, that guy's weird. And if only, he could have been here to see everybody wearing a mask all the time, he might have been a little vindicated right there.
It raises an interesting point. I've had the very bizarre experience on a number of occasions of wearing a mask on the flight from Tokyo to the US, back to the US, because I was born and raised in America. So going back to Los Angeles or back to New York, and they actually have moisturizer masks that they sell here. So you can put little moisturizer packets in the slits in the mask. So it sounds absurd, but when you're on a plane for 12 to 14 hours,
Yeah.
having, breathing in some moisture and keeping your skin relatively moist is actually quite hygienic and it's good for you. But I've had the experience of, falling asleep or getting lost in a film or whatever, and the plane lands and I deplane and I'm still wearing the mask, not thinking about it. I've sort of forgotten I've got it on. And once I get down to the luggage carousel or something, then the stairs, the stairs start, the Americans at the luggage carousel or security guards or whatever start eyeing me, half cocked, as if there's something a bit awry with this guy. Now, I know that wouldn't happen today with the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, I used to have that experience. And suddenly, I'd think, why is everybody staring at me? And then I'd realize I'm still wearing this surgical mask. So,
yeah,
Michael Jackson might be vindicated. You're right.
He might have been vindicated. So another thing that I'm finding is because of the delays in some of these projects coming out, when you say, so do you have anything else in the works? You kind of get two schools of answers. And one of them is, man, I do not feel creatively satisfied. I can't do anything. I have writer's block. And the other thing is, well, all this time being at home has given me the chance to get these 5 projects jump started. Now, I first learned about you from the Japan America book per se. What do you have going on that you can talk about besides what the lovely people at Chiba have given us?
Well, I've finished a book under contract, which is actually a book about Blade Runner.
Oh,
and the franchise, which I'm sure you're familiar with, going back to 1982.
yeah.
It's a 40-year-old franchise. And this later this year, there's going to be an anime series, Japanese animation series, which is made right here in Tokyo with cooperation with artists in Los Angeles, artists in London, and in Toronto. So it's a big deal. It's going to be a sort of high-tech CGI series with looks absolutely incredible. And they asked me, they commissioned me to write this book because I'd written about anime, of course, but also as an American, I know all about the Blade Runner franchise and its history. Mm-hmm. And that's coming out, I think, this summer or fall. It'll be a book about the Blade Runner franchise and how it's kind of come full circle, being turned into an anime that's going to be out on streaming and I think Cartoon Network, and then maybe it's Netflix. I'm not sure who's going to carry it. Wow. So that project's in the can, and I've been working on 2 other books. One is a novel which I've carried around me for a number of years, mm-hmm. But the pandemic has given me an excuse to try to dig deeper into it. And the other is a book actually about streaming media and how it has sort of overtaken our lives. It's pretty amazing when you think about it that, YouTube started in 2005. Yeah. And then, you probably remember BitTorrent, right? Everybody was torrenting.
Oh, yeah. I cannot confirm whether or not I used it, but I'm very familiar with the technology. Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly right. Who knows who used it? But yeah. And then there was a really interesting period where, Netflix was delivering DVDs. They were a mail order service, basically a rental DVD service. And it seems like suddenly, whiplash, everything is streaming.
Yeah.
And so I've started doing this research into how this happened. Not only the technological side of it, but the social side and the impact it has on us now that everything is available at a fingertip, that you can stop it whenever you want, that it's on demand. It's really transforming the way we consume media, everything from sports to news to things that like this, a Zoom call that you just put up online and suddenly it's an interview and anyone can look at it at any time. So I've become fascinated with the way that's changed the way we feel about media and the way we kind of, we're really quite spoiled. I mean, when you think about this pandemic and how everyone's been locked away, and yet we've got so much entertainment.
Yes.
It's like incredible.
Yes. Well, credit goes to you, and this is intended to be a compliment. I can't pigeonhole you You can't go, oh, Roland, that guy, he only writes about cats. He only. So it's this very interesting, multifaceted career that it sounds like you just kind of go, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you kind of go, this intrigues me. I'm going to do this. And then you do that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a general framework. I mean, I was a huge Who fan as a kid. So I kind of narrowed my focus when I wanted to interview a rock star, and I went after Pete Townsend, because he wrote the stuff.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Haruki Murakami, the Japanese novelist. I've interviewed Yoko Ono in New York. So there is a Japan, I suppose Japan, England, those two countries have been sort of obsession of mine, island nations, with, in a sense, really uniquely close relationships with the US. I mean, I've often told people that you could argue that the closest ally the United States has in the world right now, in terms of economic and military relations, is Japan. This country where I am now, there are 50,000 US troops stationed here in Japan. That's more troops than the US has in Iraq, or had in Iraq. 50,000 troops. So it's quite a tight relationship. And Japan's location right off the coast of Russia and China is really critical strategically to US military and economic interests. So I suppose, in a sense, there is somewhat of a narrowing. I mean, and I became interested in the streaming media question in society, partly because of my life in Japan. Really, so much streaming media in the very beginning, especially when it was kind of, totally amateurish, people just, uploading pirated stuff, and you could access it. You could access an anime that aired in Japan like an hour later because somebody would rip it from TV and upload it. And I don't know how they, I don't know who watched it, but it was really interesting. It's been interesting meeting the people who did that, and how they were, they weren't even being paid. They were just super fans, just like Who fans back in the day. They just loved the stuff so much that they wanted to devote every free hour away from work to doing something to share it with more fans. And I think that story too is really interesting. I mean, I think fandom is fascinating, just when you think about the world we live in now with YouTubing and VTubing and so on. And I know some people make very, very good money doing that, but arguably the way you get into it and the way people start doing it is really on their free time, and the people who watch it and the people who donate money to the chat, to super chat, to chat with their favorite YouTuber. It's just amazing. It's just incredible sort of, I think it's become, every culture has become so obsessed with their hobbies.
In a good way. I mean, that's kind of the best thing and the worst thing about the current state of the world is anything you want to do, you can do it. Now, sometimes the intentions behind it are a little, but there's no gatekeeper saying, no, there's nobody who wants to see a docuseries about cats. No one wants to see that. Well, somebody can either crowdfund it, they could just do it themselves, because as you were saying, a lot of interviews these days are just Zoom calls. Well, documentaries, why can't you make a documentary of just interviews that were done over Zoom calls, sweeten the audio, combine it with stock footage, combine it with footage people sent in, and you have a documentary at $0 cost. So thankfully the Shiba folks did a little better than that, just a little bit better with actually traveling and sourcing things. But
well, yeah, I should mention that Jeffrey O'Connor, who directed the films, he's an Academy Award nominee, and he's a terrific guy. And one of the reasons I said yes when they asked me about hosting and narrating the film in Japan was because I spoke to Jeff on a call. I think it was Skype back then, the old days, and just really, really liked him, and really liked the way he was dedicated to approaching Japan with dignity and respectfully, and not, as I said earlier, not doing this weird Japan crazy wacko Japan story. And really, really, I think he approached it with great sensitivity, and also the producers were great, really, really supportive.
Well, I have two quick questions for you. Sorry to cut you off here, but I want to be respectful of your time because it's the evening. You are probably ready to go to sleep soon. I'm starting the day here, the almighty time difference.
You're in New York, yeah?
I am in New York. 14 hours, is it? 13?
Yeah, 13 now. I lived in New York for many, many years. So
exactly. You didn't just travel here to interview Yoko
Ono. No, I lived in Manhattan.
Exactly. Question one. Do you have a TV show recommendation you could pass along? And it's totally fine if it's only airing in Japan, because face it, we could find it if we really want to see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, God, there's so much great stuff on TV, but I'm especially coming from the States, I mean, I think Japan makes great anime, animation and so on. But in terms of live action television, the US it's astonishing how many good shows are out there. But this is going to sound really so bizarre, but I really love Better Call Saul. Do you know that show?
Everybody, I would say when I ask this question, most of my interviews, 20% of the people say Better Call Saul is the show you should be watching. So nothing weird about that. I
really, really love it. And I miss it. It's they haven't come back yet with the next season, but that's the show I really love. I really liked the first season of Westworld. This is years ago now. This was 3 or 4 years ago. But I thought Westworld was interesting because they were really taking a lot of ideas from great sci-fi anime, especially the film Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
And implementing those ideas in a contemporary, with all the technology they have now with television and digital effects and CG. I thought that first season in particular was really, really quite good.
Most people love that first season. Can't speak about the future ones.
Right, exactly. One other show I'll mention, which I really, really like, and also I just think it's a really quirky sense of humor, is the show. I think it's called Barry.
Oh yeah, with Bill Hader. Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah, I think that. I mean, I haven't seen that in a while again, but I thought that first season was really wicked.
I'm glad to know that your taste is great in TV and music. Well,
thanks.
My closing question to you is, I look at you as somebody who's successful, not just because commercially successful, but you figured out what it is that you want to do for a living and you do it. You're not moonlighting per se, like a lot of other authors are. And if you are, we can keep that a secret. But my closer to you, Roland, is any last words for the kids?
For the kids? Yeah. Well, I get asked a lot on when I do book signings or talks, especially in the US. Well, some kids ask me how they can do what I do. And I always say, sit down with a pen and piece of paper or in front of your computer and just start writing. But the other question I get a lot is, how can I get to Japan? How can I live and work in Japan? How can I make anime? Mm-hmm. And a few years ago, I would say that's pretty tough. Definitely learn Japanese, and then, good luck to you. But I can say now that partly because there's so much involvement, big global companies like Netflix, mm-hmm. Amazon here, other, big global HBO Max, all these companies that are here trying to work with Japanese artists, that has kind of opened up the creative industry here to more non-Japanese.
Sure.
So I can confidently say, if you're a young person in the US right now watching this and you really want to come to Japan and work in Japan, the opportunities are really better than ever right now. There's a real hunger, I think, for international creatives to work in Japan.
Yeah.
And again, because of the involvement of Netflix and other big streaming companies and media companies, it's really opening the door a lot wider. And I'm really happy about that. And I'm happy to see more non-Japanese coming over here and getting jobs in the anime industry, getting jobs in the TV industry, getting jobs in the music industry as well. And I think that's a good thing for Japan and a good thing for people who like Japan.
Yeah, totally putting you on the spot here. Do you by any chance know Keith Cahoon?
Of course.
Okay.
Keith's an old pal. Yeah.
Keith
Tower Records, Mr. Tower Records, Japan.
Exactly. I don't speak any Japanese, and he comes over and he's the head of Tower Records Japan, and he does that. So I think you just kind of illustrated that point. Keith kind of predated the whole thing. So there you go.
Yeah, Keith's one of the pioneers. Keith's a really good guy. I really like him a lot. I wish he were still here. I think he's in San Francisco now.
Yes, that is the word.
Good guy.
The bottom line is this. Thank you for your time. Keep up all the greatness, and really looking forward to the next thing that you got coming out soon, because I know it's going to be quality oriented, Roland.
Thank you, Darren. It's been a pleasure.
Paltrocast.